UFO in the sentence, unbelievably fucking outrageous.
UFO had the potential to be one of the biggest bands in the world.
I have no question that the greatest era of UFOs was the classic lineup. Vocalist Phil Mogg, guitarist Michael Schenker, lead guitarist Michael Schenker, rhythm guitarist and keyboard player Paul Raymond, bassist Pete Way, drummer Andy Parker. From Lights Out through to Obsession and Strangers in the Night, that was one hell of an era. They were great records, great songs, and an inspired band.
They enjoyed all the trappings that came from being a rock band, a working rock band.
We took the party to the venue, and to the dressing room, to the hotel, and to the waking up in the morning. It was non-stop.
UFO got together in the late 60s, which surprises most people who really regard them as a 70s band, but they started out as Hocus Pocus and then became UFO, inspired by the name of the club, the famous West End club in London. And it was Mick Bolton on guitar, Phil Mogg vocals, Pete Way bass, Andy Parker drums, three of whom were to go on to be part of the great UFO era.
That weird period after psychedelia, sort of 1967, but before heavy metal, if you like, gets going in the 70s. Lots of riffs, lots of songs that went on and on and on, and quite a primitive sound, which I think probably had as much to do with the fact that they were quite inexperienced musicians at the time, as it did to anything else.
The saving of the group really was when they got that out of their system. By the time they did their, what was actually their fourth album, their third album in the studio, but their fourth album overall was called Phenomenon. And that was the first album to feature on guitar Michael Schenker.
Well, the Scorpions played with us quite a bit. In Germany when we went over, because we were popular in Germany, we played to 2,000 or 3,000 people, and Scorps were basically our sport group. Well, one time, Bernie Marsden, who played with us, Bernie, for whatever reason, his passport, something had gone wrong, and I can't remember where it was, Hanover, I don't think it was Hanover, but the promoter said, look, can you do something, because you know, I don't know, there's 800 or 900 people there or something, university building. Well, we used to watch the Scorpions, me and Phil, obviously. And so Phil said, he's really good. You know, the other guitar player said, what about getting him to fill in? So, as it would happen, just spoke to Rudolph and said, could we use... Rudolph, by the way, was the one who spoke English. Michael didn't. Could we use your brother to play? So we ended up doing 45 minutes, and we in Germany at the time had what would be hits, Boogie for Jules, Come On Everybody, and I can't remember the other one. And Michael knew them. So we did extended versions and a couple of other things, and we got away with it. Ironically, I think the promoter actually complained that it wasn't UFO, but then we ended up doing three different dates where Michael played with Scorpions and played with us, and you know, that was it. He wanted to stay with us, and we got, you know, it was great.
Michael Schenker is, without question, one of the most talented guitarists hard rock has ever thrown up. His sense of melody, his sense of harmonic, his sense of power, his whole sense of being and belonging to a guitar made him a guitar hero in the 1970s, someone everyone wanted to follow. His flying V, his flying blonde mane, everything about him said guitar god. And he was one of the truly most talented and innovative and original hard rock guitarists we've ever had the good fortune to hear.
Michael brought in a lot, actually, obviously, because of his guitar talent, and I think what it was, we were an open canvas. So, you know, the style we had and our ability, myself and Andy Parker, to play a certain feel which sat behind Michael's guitar, and it left it open canvas to write, you know, and it expanded the whole thing. We became a completely new unit. You know, it wasn't like, oh, let's play this and that, and God bless Bernie, you know, but I guess Bernie at the time was that sort of bluesy, sort of, we were playing what other people did. This is the time when we started to play what we did.
Once Schenker joined the group, you know, they're suddenly operating at a completely different level. Until then, they'd been very popular in Japan. The joke being back then, you know, oh, you've never heard of us, but we're big in Japan. In their case, it was a reality. Practically with their very first single, they'd had a hit over there. With the first two albums, they're playing over there to sold out concert halls. But it's not until Phenomenon that the rest of the world finally catches up with UFO and starts to take them seriously.
Phenomenon actually was the one that didn't really sell well, but had Dr. Doctor on it, and was one of those things where people saw us on a couple of TV shows and went, this is great. It's like me and Michael both had long hair, so I guess we were pretty skinny in those days and stuff like that. A lot of guitar players and that, so I want to be like him, and I like the way, even whatever the way I played the bass, it was a little bit like, well, we're the way we are. And I forget how the name of the show, but it was a very important show. We did it at the time in America, where whilst the album, you know, record stores weren't particularly taking it, and that wasn't seen to sell. The actual vision thing, people went, how is that?
You've got a band no longer trying to be psychedelic and trippy, just trying to be a really good rock band. There are 2 tracks on that album that are now really huge rock classics, Dr. Doctor and Rock Bottom. Rock Bottom was a fantastic showcase, particularly for Michael Schenker.
Well, Rock Bottom is one of Schenker's really heaviest, absolutely punishing riff. It's just a fantastically, if you like hard rock with a nice bit of crunch, then that is the song for you. And
there's everything in there. I'd say it starts off with a massive guitar, and just great lyrics, and then you're into, like, as a keyboard player's point of view, there's a play-off between the guitarist and the keyboards, and we do harmonies and that, yeah, the song just goes along. It's just great, you know. And like I said, you know, it's never the same twice, and there's so much in there musically, you know, and it can develop into whatever you want it to be. That's the joy with the band. Is that live they would experiment, and unfortunately it's sadly lacking in a lot of bands these days. But then they just go off on one, and if somebody was going for it, they'd say, oh, okay, right, and we'll follow that, and we'll just see where we're going, you know.
With UFO, you have to do it live. You know, it's one of those songs, if you don't do it, you get a hell of a lot of complaints, you know what I mean? It's like, I've seen you for 4 years and you didn't do Rock Bottom. I remember in 1975 I saw you do Rock Bottom, and then Michael did the blah blah blah, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's one of those things, it can be quite long. It's a musician's solo, it's a guitarist's song, you know.
The fun thing was, it was never the same twice. So you'd be doing things, and then Mog would bring everything down and develop on that, and then, you know, and it was I would imagine a guitarist's dream to because they can just go off on one, and as the rest of the band and Pete and that be all watching, and you know, getting the dynamics in there. So Rock Bottom on the albums, like I say, it was only like 3.5 minutes, but it's just took off on its own, and they did that with a lot of their songs, Lights Out and all that. They all took a life on their own live. And so if you went to see the band, you never saw the same gig twice.
Doctor, it's a brilliant melody. It's a really anthemic song, but it's got a fantastically sort of bouncy rock riff that when people talk about how influential a band like UFO are, well, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden has always been a very vocal supporter of the band, a big fan, and I actually saw Iron Maiden only a few days before the Download Festival 2007, so we're talking about it was in Bulgaria, and even now the last song that Maiden play before they go on is Doctor Doctor, because it never fails to get a crowd going mad. And I saw it at Earl's Court just before Christmas 2006, and dare I say it was the best song I heard all night. I mean, no disrespect there, Maiden, but it's just such a fantastic track.
Every time we did it, it was the song becomes it takes on a life of its own when you play in front of people. The punters just the warmth that comes off them, because they all know it, all familiar, and they're all singing along. Phil doesn't need to sing, you know, because they all know the lyrics, and the whole place will be bouncing. You know, it's a fantastic feeling.
Doctor, doctor, please, can't you see I'm going west? Doctor, doctor, please, can't you
So Doctor Doctor, yeah, came about simple riff Michael had. I mean, isn't it ironical there's no lead solo on it? It's just a guitar harmony. I think actually last time we did it with Michael, we actually started to put a lead bit in it, but it doesn't, it's just a song. So, you know, a band with a guitar player of Michael's stature, no, there's no lead solo.
UFO on Phenomenon put themselves apart from most other people. It was almost an American sound. That's the strange thing. I'd relate it more in a way akin to what Montrose were about to do in America than something the Black Sabbath were doing. Yes, you can say that elements that perhaps relate them to Thin Lizzy, but I think part of the beauty of that era of British hard rock, UFO, Thin Lizzy, those sort of bands, was they were all individual. And the thing about Dr. Doctor and Rock Bottom is they represent two different aspects of UFO. They're both very anthemic, but Rock Bottom drives, whereas I think there's a certain element of open car motoring down the highway with Dr. Doctor. It doesn't drive as hard as Rock Bottom, but they're both fantastic melodies. They're built on melodies and tremendous riffing, and I have no doubt about it, they remain tremendously important and influential to this day.
Doctor was kind of the breaking ground, if you like. Every band has one song which they eventually, you know, they have to play at all the gigs. It's expected, and Doctor is UFOs. Whether they like it or not, you got to do it, you know. I'd say it was Schenker's. He definitely made his mark with the band on that, and that was their, you know, opening gambit, if you like. And they moved on from there. But Fawcett was they're like, okay, that's the old days, and now here we go, something new, you know.
I think it was pretty inspirational because you've got the Phenomenon album, which goes through a transition period. Fawcett became a band album because we were getting more powerful, because we were, I think possibly because so much touring in the States, we had that thing of we're playing bigger sounding stuff, you know, and we were slightly aware of where we wanted to go with the songs, you know, the bigger sort of back-end stuff, leaving stuff open for Michael to a solo, and the songs were pretty well constructed at that point.
By the time they made No Heavy third album with Michael, No Heavy Petting, there was a feeling that they needed to sort of do something a little bit different. And they had worked with the idea already at that point of having a second guitarist, Paul Chapman, who ended up replacing Schenker a few years later. He actually played for a little while in the lineup, so making them a five-piece. They'd used a little bit of keyboards on Fawcett, and I think that the decision was made to perhaps try and bring a keyboard player in and see what happened.
Whilst we did make a transition because we brought in Danny Parnell as keyboards, it did soften us up, but there were some good hard rock songs on it. But we did lose out on a certain amount of sales and stuff going straight in the shops. In fact, we actually cancelled the tour, which was going to be with Kiss, and Kiss said, "Oh, it's really strange they're not coming on tour with us," because we got on very well with the guys in Kiss, and they want us to tour them. But at that point, the financial side of it was actually getting, you know, because we owed a lot of money, you know. Even though we started to sell records, we didn't have a great record deal. Which hence, next album, Lights Out, went straight in the top 30. But you don't know what's going on because you don't, you know, suddenly your album's in the charts. And it's the work you don't know you done that does it. When the smoke of the bomb was charted, one's all the way, round to the foot, on the gun, maybe now your time is come.
By the time you get to the Lights Out album in 1977, suddenly you've got a chart album. Lights Out wasn't a top 10 hit. Don't forget, this is the days when the American charts weren't comprised solely of album sales the way they are now. it also comprised of radio play. So your chart position was entirely incumbent on A, how many records you'd sold, but B, how many radio stations were playing those tracks. An album like Lights Out wasn't getting played a great deal on the radio, but it was selling a great deal with the hardcore grassroots fans. So it was a top 20 album in America.
I think Lights Out was the album where they really set out to crack America. And Ron Nevison came on board, who'd engineered for Led Zeppelin before. He worked on Physical Graffiti. You know, he had a hell of a track record, and the feeling within the band, and certainly within their management at the time, was that this was the guy that was going to take them up to the next level.
There's no doubt that with Lights Out, Ron Nevison gave the band a really crisper sound, and the definitive UFO sound. That said, Leo Lyons wasn't all bad, and those albums have still got quite a lot of punch to them. So yes, it was a bit of a step up. But it was a step up in the right way. They still had a sort of more of a classic sort of mix of a slight European feel with the way Schenker was playing his guitar, and a more sort of palatable to American FM radio kind of sound.
Lights out in London, hold 'em tight till the end. It's better now, you know we'll never wait till tomorrow. Lights out in London, hold 'em tight till the end. God knows when I'm coming on my road.
Lights Out was a leap. There's no question about it, whereas in the past UFO had a sound. You listen to Phenomenon or you listen to Force It, there was a sound there and a style. And they had songs, and occasional songs, that stuck out as being worthwhile. Rock Bottom, you think of Doctor Doctor, Natural Thing, it goes on, this kid's. But what they did with Lights Out, there was a consistency. It went throughout the whole album. Paul Raymond had been brought in on keyboards and rhythm guitar, and the new lineup, which also had Michael Schenker, Phil Mogg, Pete Way, Andy Parker, that was a classic. It gelled immediately. There was an excitement and a buzz about it. You could hear it on that record.
I think if you listen, the songwriting on that album is a leap on from No Heavy Petting, which makes you think that probably Nevison had a lot to do with kind of just polishing the songs. They went out and recorded it in America, and at that time they started to enjoy the rock star lifestyle, even if perhaps their own stardom and financial returns wasn't quite in keeping with the sort of lifestyle that they were leading at the time.
You only had to hear Lights Out once to realise that UFO had upped their game, and so it may not have been so radically different stylistically, but with a production like that, everybody suddenly was taking this band very, very seriously, and it was clear. It's not a surprise if you just listen to that back to back with No Heavy Petting. You can definitely see which album is going to be the more successful. It's just got that little bit more commercial savvy all the way through, from the song right through the production. So Nevison certainly put the band on the map with what he brought.
The title track has just got this real kind of ferocious energy. It talks a little bit about anarchy in the streets today. It's almost a bit punk rock in sort of the terms of the lyrics, but just that kind of hard driving sound. That's just what that is the essence of UFO. Similarly, Love to Love is the power ballad. All bands by this point, all heavy rock bands at this point went down this road. You can blame it on Stairway to Heaven. This idea of having a sort of a long piece of music, a few tempo changes and so on. But that, you know, Love to Love is UFO's like Stairway to Heaven, if you like, albeit several rungs short of the Stairway to Heaven, but that's kind of what it does. And Too Hot to Handle is the sort of What at the time they've called it a kind of boogie. That was still quite a common term. It's kind of a rock boogie type track with some fantastically crass lyrics, basically about what great shaggers they clearly think they are. But it's a great song and it's a lot of fun, and all three of those songs are still performed live by the band today. They sum up all three aspects, I think, of the kind of UFO sound.
There's been too many times and I can't go back. Not bass guitars from devil tools like shacks. What it amounts up to, I don't want it all. Lost you and I need you to stay. Misty green and blue. Love to love you. Misty green and blue. Love to love you.
Finally, come 1978, you get the Obsession album, and at this moment, you've got a group poised to possibly become as big as Thin Lizzy. They were on top of the pops with the single Only You Can Rock Me. They were headlining 2, 3, 4 nights at the Hammersmith Odeon in London. They were on the front cover of music papers like Sounds. So again, although they weren't selling records at the same level that Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple were at that moment, they absolutely were the coming thing at that time. And this, don't forget, against the backdrop of punk, new wave, groups like Black Sabbath are now faltering, groups like Deep Purple have now broken up, groups like Led Zeppelin are 2 years away from breaking up. Suddenly UFO, Judas Priest, Thin Lizzy, here they come like the cavalry over the horizon.
Who's taking time out? We'll take a shot out. We're the boys, we got nothing to lose. I've had enough now of school stuff now. You ain't with us, then it's just bad news. Only you can rock me. Come on back now, do it again.
Obsession and Lights Out, I think, are the two albums that came the closest that UFO came to making real classic studio records. The Obsession is kind of more of the same, but it's a little bit more adventurous, a little bit more ambitious in parts. They're using string arrangements on a couple of tracks, which they did do that on Lights Out, but they go back to that approach on Obsession. You've got Only You Can Rock Me on there, which is again another sort of crowd pleasing live track.
For me, it was Obsession was the album that got me into UFO, the Only You Can Rock Me, and that. I just thought that was a fantastically structured album from start to finish. And that led me to go on their back catalogue, you know. And I always felt they were one of these bands that, like Thin Lizzy, where he had the album and the song on the album was fine, but live is where it was at. And to me, there are only two live albums. It's Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy and Stranger Than Love by UFO, and that's what we played. As soon as they came out, that's what we, you know, as growing up going to the pub, used to come back, whack that on the stereo, because it was just fantastic from start to finish, and, you know, played it to death.
Only You Can Rock Me is a great way to open any album, and it opened up Obsession. You got Pack It Up and Go, looking out for #1. The hits just roll off the tongue. However, yet again, UFO didn't quite seem to have what it took to make it work for them and take them to another level. It did well, very well, and in certain parts of America like Texas they were huge, they were arena headliners, but it didn't cross the national sphere, and somehow it's because UFO didn't have that great vision and perspective. They were always messing up.
They're really keeping an eye on America by this point. There's songs like Only You Can Rock Me, which is just a brilliant commercial hard rock track, and then you've got Cherry, which is probably one of the best written songs they've got. So it's quite a little bit lighter than Lights Out, and as well, they're going in from there into doing Stranger Than Night, and it is the last studio album with Schenker. you can, I don't know, maybe you can read things into it in retrospect, but you wouldn't have, you wouldn't have thought there was anything wrong there. They sound very tight, very cohesive, even though we all know that they were bickering. Mog and Schenker were certainly bickering a hell of a lot. Everybody was doing a lot of drugs and they were drinking like, crazy. So it's unravelling, but you can't quite hear it on the album.
Gotta keep my love for cherry. That's for me, there's only you. Through the barrooms just for pennies. Wish I wasn't just passing through. Tell me your secrets. Tell me no one where are you now? We are gone. We are gone.
After the Obsession album, they'd recorded a lot of those dates and put them into a double live album, Strangers in the Night, which even at the time was regarded as one of the best live double albums of all time. Thin Lizzy had literally just a few months before released Live and Dangerous, and I think Sounds had made that like their critics' #1 album of the year, and now literally 6 months later comes Strangers in the Night. And in that very kind of, at this point, it's almost a tradition in rock music. You've got Made in Japan by Deep Purple, tremendous success. Live and Dangerous, tremendous success. Frampton Comes Alive, that was the album that broke Peter Frampton worldwide. Suddenly UFO have their defining moment with their live double album, Strangers in the Night. The only downer, man, is that by the time it's come out, Schenker is already gone. So it's kind of like a suicide pact. I mean, I'm sure they didn't feel this at the time, but it was like shooting themselves in the foot.
On the tabletop she's dancing, still smiling to me. Turn around, oh cherry, for me. Let me know you know me.
Strangers in the Night is probably regarded by a lot of UFO fans as the ultimate UFO. It's a double live album from the Obsession tour, and it has to be said it is absolutely brilliant. What a great live album. It's one of the great double live albums. You had Live and Dangerous, you had Made in Japan, Lizzy and Deep Purple, and you've got this. You've got this tremendous record, Strangers in the Night. It captured UFO at their best on stage. It captured them absolutely at a pinnacle, and they were in brilliant form.
It's a great mix of getting it sounding really great sonically and also sounding exciting with a little bit of looseness to it as well. So it was the perfect album for them at the time, because it made you realise also at that point a big live album was the kind of mark of a serious rock band. Everybody had one, and if you didn't, it would suggest that A, you weren't good enough live, which is absolutely the core of what you're about as a heavy metal band. So if you weren't good enough live, or you didn't have enough material, and you've also got to remember people were dubbing on the noise of 100,000 people sometimes onto their live albums. At least UFO didn't have to do that. But it's always going to be the definitive UFO album. There's no doubt about that. If you want one album to sum up the band, it's Strangers in the Night.
Everybody talks about it, everybody likes it. It was like at the end of it, I don't know, a year on the road. That was, ironically, Chicago Amphitheatre. We were doing 2 nights there, huge place. Ironically enough, some of it was recorded in Louisville, actually, but most of it was initially done in Chicago. We did patch some of it up, but not very much, because the band were very tight then, but at the same time, you're playing a lot of people. With the way we did our show, it was very much a in-your-face sort of to the audience type show. So obviously there's going to be a few overdubs, but it's very real, very live.
Too hot to handle. Wake up when this voice could fly. Real rock and no race. Why ain't no slow chance? There ain't no romance. Walking on the quick chase. I was too hot, baby.
What happens when you record a live album, and when you do, you're all geared up, and you can have some fantastic gigs, and nobody sees them, you know, apart from the, you know, it's not recorded. And then when it comes to the red light syndrome, and it goes on, the whole gig can go to pot, because people aren't thinking about, people are thinking about exactly what they're playing, and you know, it becomes a bit staid. And that's why I think Strangers works so well, because I think they kind of forgot the red light was on and they just went for it. And that's why it works, you know.
I worked on the tour that they undertook to promote Strangers in the Night. They've got Paul Tonka Chapman filling in for Schenker. Very good guitarist, lovely fella, did a great job every night. Wasn't Schenker. Simple as that. You know, whoever's playing guitar in Guns N' Roses at the moment could be the greatest guitarist in the world, but he ain't Slash. And at the end of the day, it's not just about the music. It's about the groove. It's about the idea. It's about the fun, the feel, the atmosphere. And you want to see Schenker on that stage. You want to see Slash on that stage. If the Stones go out tomorrow without Keith Richards, it ain't the Stones. You know, they could have God playing the guitar. It ain't going to be the same. And unfortunately, that was the downfall of UFO.
At the time, you'd say we travelled a lot. I mean, you know, you do like a year and a half non-stop on the road. You know, it gets to you. You know, you're doing coke, loads of it. You know, that sort of thing. I mean, I'd say, ironically enough, I think the thing that actually really clinched it was Aerosmith asked him to join. Because we were playing with Aerosmith's special guests, and Stephen used to watch every night, and like Michael's playing and that was when the bust-up was going on with Joe Perry, because Joe Perry said to me, it's all, you had that guy that they got rid of me for, so that's a fact, you'd say it. You know, but you get to a point, you're on a plane with somebody every day, in hotels every day, and yeah, me and Phil can be a bit wearing, but you know, Michael's the way Michael is. Michael's a sensitive artist. You know, so unfortunately I wish Michael wasn't quite so sensitive, because I think it would help him, you know, but people are people.
See, they are playful, shall we say, and they would try the patience of anybody, I think, if they didn't have a good sense of humour. And but I think their sense of humour definitely rubbed off on Schenker eventually. You know, it's like they would definitely try his patience, if you like. And maybe it was just a point in time where Michael wanted to move on and try to do his own thing, and as people do. You know, he had a good track record up until there, and obviously the stuff he wanted to do on his own that he couldn't do with UFO. And it's just the way that things are, you know.
I think No Place to Run had a lot to live up to, because it came after Strangers in the Night, which had turned on a lot of people to UFO. It broadened out their fan base, and by No Place to Run came out about 1980, and by that time you had bands like Iron Maiden and Def Leppard were around. Heavy metal, if you like, was having a little bit of a resurgence. Those bands were in the charts. So there was a lot more focus on UFO than there had been sort of 2 or 3 years before. Everybody got into Strangers in the Night. Everybody thought how fantastic Michael Schenker is. Next thing you know, he's out of the band. And Paul Chapman had come in and replaced him, who was a Welsh guitar player. The band had known him for years. A good guitar player, but not Michael Schenker. And I think with No Place to Run, it's one of those albums albums, and it's a very familiar story, not just with UFO but with a lot of bands. You're on the road forever, you come off the road, you're bundled into a recording studio, you haven't got any new songs, you're writing on the hoof in the studio, the album comes out, you're back out on the road again, and it suffers from that.
Part of the problem with No Place to Run, it was all rushed. They came back from the road. Chrysalis said, right, we want you to go with George Martin. Now, in theory, that's an interesting combination. The reason it happened was apparently because there was a business relationship between George Martin and Chrysalis. So they all went out to Montserrat, where Martin had his studio, Air Studios, and went in to do the album.
It's not like George Martin didn't do other rock albums, because he produced Cheap Trick's All Shook Up that was released in the same year. But producing Cheap Trick has kind of more of an it makes more sense, because Cheap Trick are completely obsessed by the Beatles, and it's not like any band of UFO's age wouldn't be influenced by the Beatles, but only at a very early formative stage to make you pick up a guitar. There's no palpable Beatles influence in what UFO do. So, although it made a kind of sense with Cheap Trick, he's probably not the best producer to produce UFO.
The problem with No Place to Run, the 1980 album, the first with Paul Chapman, the first post-Schenker album, was that UFO themselves never liked the production. It was always a bit too soft, a bit too poppy, a bit too polite. They were hard rocking and they wanted it in your face. So when they came to the next album, The Wild, the Willing and the Innocent, they produced it themselves and decided we're going to rock and roll again. To be honest, it was a bit of a mishmash. You had moments like Profession, Violence and Chains, which were quite good, but by and large it's not very good. It's not really an album that brought them back into the big sphere. Remember at the time, we're talking the beginning of the 80s, the new wave of British heavy metal was hitting big, and a lot of hot young bands were very much on their tail. And also the likes of AC/DC were taking off into the stratosphere. Lizzie were having huge success. And somehow UFO went the wrong route. Now, I still don't know to this day whether it was budget. Oh, record it yourselves, guys. You know what you want to do, and we'll save some money in the studio. But whatever, it was a misguided attempt, and I don't think they ever fully recovered.
It's UFO clawing back a bit more. They've actually got some really good songs in there. Lonely Heart's really good. Profession of Violence is really good and really quite unusual as well. So they're definitely, it's them getting back on track. I think sort of getting over their grieving for Michael period, moving on, and actually feeling like they've still got something to offer. So, you know, they're still a very big band at this point as well. So, you know, it's never going to be their best, but it's in by no means their worst, and it's certainly a massive improvement on No Place to Run.
It's actually a really good record. The problem with it is that it didn't sell in the quantities that the band or Chrysalis must have hoped for, and as a result of that, I think that was quite a heavy blow to the band.
Mechanics, again, was a disappointing album following on from The Wild, the Willing and the Innocent and No Place to Run. It was a bit of a mishmash. By that point, Paul Raymond had had enough and quit. So they brought in Neil Carter, formerly of Wild Horses, who became almost the whipping boy for the band because the band loved winding him up. He was so ripe for it. And they finally had another target after Michael Schenker had left. And I think in a way they'd lost their focus so completely that there are moments like Back Into My Life which are quite good and Let It Rain. But overall, it really doesn't work. And they didn't seem to grasp the fact that this was a new era. A lot was happening in hard rock, and they were being left behind very fast and very badly.
Well, Michael Schenker leaving is one thing, but Pete Way leaving, my God, now we are really talking about major disasters now, because you've got a founding member. Pete Way was, in many ways, the heart and soul of UFO. Still is to now, but when Pete Way leaves to go and join, to form a new band called Fastway with Fast Eddie Clarke from Motorhead, well then now you've had two of the Magic 5 band lineup are gone, and they really are struggling.
We worked on an album called Making Contact in the early 80s, and they'd originally started the album with another producer, Gary Lyons, who was a very high-profile producer, had a lot of success with various rock albums. And for some reason, which I never heard about, they stopped working together, should we say. I don't know if that was acrimonious or what, but they'd recorded the rhythm tracks. They'd done about the first quarter of the album, I guess. And they were looking for somebody to finish it off, and they contacted my management at the time, and that's the link, basically, yeah. So I went in, met them, and we got on fine, carried on.
It had its moments. Blinded by a Lie, the opening track's rather good. Diesel in the Dust is also rather good, but for the most part it's an album that goes through the motions. It's a band you don't really want to believe in, and it's a band you almost pleaded with, just call it a day, guys, just give up. We've got so many great memories in the 70s. This isn't your time, it isn't your place, this isn't your era.
This was a time, early 80s, when a lot of bands who'd been rock bands, UK rock bands, had been successful in the 70s, were having a hard time surviving because musical styles had moved on. We'd been through punk, post-punk new wave, and we were into electro-pop, lots of different kinds of pop music. And a lot of bands from the 70s were being regarded to a certain extent as dinosaurs because they hadn't moved on. And I think there was a conscious effort creatively to embrace the new times.
It was a flashier look, it was a flashier sound. UFO started to appear a little bit passé. Iron Maiden and Def Leppard were selling a lot of records. Again, these were guys were, big UFO fans, but younger and a little hungrier than UFO. And Making Contact's a dog's dinner of an album. It's very, very weak. Like I say, Way has gone by then. Paul Chapman's playing bass. Management problems, drug problems. It's not a great record. Not a good time for UFO.
UFO split up in 1983 and then reformed in 1985 with a completely different lineup. Phil Mogg was the only guy left really from the great days. You had Atomic Tommy M on guitar, who was Dynamic Danny to some of us. We just loved calling him a nickname. A very talented Japanese guitarist, but someone who didn't have a particular style of his own. And they made an album called Misdemeanor. It was all right, but limp and lame compared to what they'd done before. And UFO have been through a period ever since of splitting up, getting back together. The classic lineup of Schenker, Mogg, Way, Parker and Raymond reformed in the mid-90s, so a good album in Walk on Water. But I still think to this day we all were so desperate to see that lineup make a good album. It was regarded as good compared to what had immediately gone before, but certainly doesn't live up to Lights Out or Obsession or any of those great records. And they've been limping on ever since, making an album here and there. People come and people go. So I think realistically the last 20 years of UFO has been about people wanting to see them live with Schenker when Schenker was there, and really no one cared about new UFO songs because they weren't going to compare to the old stuff. We just want to hear them play the old stuff. And I think that's the scenario UFO are in to this day.
Who's taking time out? We'll take a shot out. We're the boys, we got nothing to lose. I've had enough now of school stuff now. You ain't with us, then it's just bad news. Only you can rock me. Come on back now, do it again.
This is very typical of the kind of bands that get written out of history. UFO are one of those bands. Now, whether they're due a renaissance in terms of, I don't think they're going to get it by making more albums. I think they're more going to get it out of, maybe they get it if they got Michael back and they did a proper world tour again, but they are a hugely influential band. I mean, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden is just one. The fact that he plays a song by UFO before Maiden go on stage every night. You've got Lars wearing his UFO t-shirt. There's all kinds of, bands that will talk about what a great band they were. But again, they're never going to get mentioned. They're never going to be as important, because I think it's maybe the era that they were in as well. Not a lot of people talk about Judas Priest being a big influence, but they obviously were as well, and the Scorpions. So certain bands just stand on their own as good bands without anybody really giving them much credit for you know, let's say the very influential playing of Michael Schenker.
The thing with UFO is that they never achieved what a lot of people, their fans, their management, their record company, the band themselves, thought that they were capable of. You know, you look at a band like Def Leppard, who came swept along in the 80s, taking a blueprint of a lot of what UFO had done, and you know, sold, you know, became a multi-platinum rock band. I think, you know, UFO were at their best at sort of 77, 78, at which point punk was the biggest thing going on in the UK at the time, and I think the media attention shifted away from that. They weren't a groundbreaking band, they weren't a Led Zeppelin or a Deep Purple or Black Sabbath. They never had the hit singles that Thin Lizzy had. They were a charismatic, obvious frontman like Phil Lynott. And similarly, they weren't an insane cartoon heavy metal band like Judas Priest, who of course were around at the same time as UFO, but suddenly had this second wind in the 80s and went and sold millions and millions of records in America. You know, UFO lost it because they couldn't keep it together with Schenker. I think if Schenker had stuck around, you could have seen something happening, but it didn't happen. But there's sort of this same underachieving quality is what I think appeals to a lot of fans about them. There's always this sense that they could have done better. It's a very British story. Definitely something very English about it. It's like a sort of carry-on rock band.
People always say if only they were more together, they could have been so much more successful, but that's UFO. To change one part would have meant changing so much about them, and they were never meant to be megastars. They were never meant to have the 3 or 4 or 5 million selling record, and I don't think they changed anything they did for that. It's part of what they are and who they are and how they conducted themselves. They've done some huge shows over the years. They've appeared with so many different bands, and they've left their mark. And realistically, I think if you look at Pete Wayne and said, Pete, would you change anything? If someone came to you now and said, let's go back to 1973, let's change the way you approach things, the attitude, cut down on the excess, okay? I think you'd say, nah, I love the excess. That was what we were about, that's part of what we were, and I wouldn't change anything.